Hello, Cassidy here, and today I have a couple announcements. I've been keeping some secrets, and if you watch Paul Vanderklay's channel or have been around Bridges of Meaning, you might already be let in on these secrets, but I thought today was a good time to share them here. So one is more professional, one is more personal, but I'll be sharing them both, and to start, I'll be sharing the more professional secret. If you've been around the channel long enough, you may know that I have been involved in finding ways to take this estuary movement that has started on the internet and bring it into in-person local communities. Last year, Matthias and I ran our first festival in Germany, and since then, we've been working hard to do the second one. And I'm glad that I can finally announce that the festival is scheduled and tickets are on sale. The Breakwater Festival will be in Mannheim, Germany, October 27th through the 29th. And we'll be supporting the local estuary there that has been participating for several years. We worked with them last year in Landau, and so we're excited to partner with them again. I've left a link down below with all the festival information and how you can support us. Now, obviously, if you want to support us, you could come and be part of the festivities. But for those of you who can't make the trip, we're also selling our t-shirts from last year's Bridges of Meaning Festival for those who want to show their support but just won't be able to make it, or for anyone who really has an interest in some high quality lobster merch. Now with that out of the way, I can get to some personal news. So I've thought a lot about whether I was going to share this here, but given the nature of my conversations and how personal they are, it's been hard to avoid this part of my life in those dialogues. And so I figured I would let you all in on this development. If you understand the meaning of the title, then you might already know, but if not, I'm having a baby. Here's an ultrasound of the little bean. It was funny, I had never had the chance to actually see an ultrasound before going to the doctor, and so it's been amazing to see how clearly you can see everything. I love watching its little arms and legs flap around, and I don't know, it's just very cool to watch that process. Everything is developing normally, which is great. We're very grateful. I've never been more excited to hear the word average in my life. I'm due at the end of August, which it really has snuck up on me. So it's all been quite the experience. So being married last October already put me in a totally different realm and world. But now with this new development, or not so new development, it's entering me in a whole new season of life. And it's got me thinking a lot about the journey that got me here and reflecting on a lot of these questions about family and marriage that go around in these corners. So for the rest of our time together, I'd like to share a little bit of my reflections and what I've been thinking with y'all. So I was not always a person who was certain I would have kids. In fact, when I was younger, it was a bit of a question mark. I liked kids. I enjoyed watching them. I had no problem being around them. But I just remember when I was young, friends would ask me, oh, do you want kids? And I just didn't really have clarity on the answer. You know, I think for me, I was very scared of pregnancy and birth. And there was this whole part of me that recognized I had no idea what that really meant to take on parenthood. So it was something that I was sort of wary of. But along the line, as I started reflecting on those questions, I thought about what it would be like if I was told that I didn't have the ability to have children. And it made me really sad to the point where I was like, I think I would cry if I heard that. And it sort of sparked something in me to realize that, wow, somewhere deep down, there is this desire and want to have children. But I don't think it was sort of in this positive way. It was more like, okay, well, I'll probably bite the bullet and do it. But as life went on and things got complicated, there was a certain point in my life, sort of mid to late 20s, where I started to question whether marriage was actually in my future. It's not that I didn't want to get married. I think I just got to the place that realized that just because I want something doesn't mean that it's good or a path that I should take. You know, maybe I would have been better off single, dedicating my life to something bigger than myself and helping people and being a service in a way that I never could if I had a family. And I was Protestant at the time, so now I look back and sort of see it as this contemplation of a life of monasticism, but there just wasn't really a clear path how to do that in a Protestant frame. I remember wrestling with this question a lot, asking, should I get married? Is it a good thing to do? What happens if I don't? And the responses I often got were that most people do. And I see that response as a really well-intended thing, trying to give me hope that this desire I had would be fulfilled. But it was also sort of difficult because just because most people get married doesn't mean that I will. It doesn't mean that I should. And it doesn't really help me in the sense of, well, what do I do if I don't? What if I am not most people? So I was still struggling with this question of what do I do if it never comes? And on top of that, during this time, I was faced with a lot of harsh realities of what marriage and family bring. I'm a millennial, so I grew up part of the sort of Disney, princess, rom-com, Renaissance generation. So a lot of the pop culture you were seeing when we were very young that was targeted at women and girls really sold this story of the happily ever after, of walking down the aisle with that fated someone. And that was the epitome of the female journey. And on top of that, being a part of Christian churches, there was a huge respect and love for marriage. And so there was a lot of encouragement to get married and get married very young, highlighting the benefits of marriage, trying to make it as desirable as possible. Yet with these influences, there were also these counterbalances in culture as time went on. We had to face the realities and share in the felt experience of the rise in divorce rates. And you see that pattern reflecting in the stories that are now being marketed to women. There was still some sense of this romantic love being the ultimate bliss, but there was still a lot of gray area in that. And it often sort of stopped there. It never really talked about the idea of children and what that meant in the place of marriage and journey. In fact, often the films presented children as the problematic issue that started to create the tension in these relationships. And so many women, I think, started asking these questions. Is this idea of marriage and family some childhood fantasy or religious propaganda? And for myself, I can't say that I went that far. I think growing up, I saw a lot of healthy marriages. And so I could see some of the places where I felt like maybe things were being overstated or sugar-coated in this idea of marriage and family and patterns. But I also saw the benefits and the beauty within that path. And so it never got me completely disenchanted with the idea of marriage. But with the good, I also was able to see the cost of what marriage actually asks of you. And if my younger years were filled with slightly rosy pictures of marriage, this time in my mid to late 20s put me face to face with some of the harder truths of what marriage can mean. And I think it settled in deeper, this responsibility of that path. And, I'd always been looking and trying to understand what marriage was, but I started asking the question, why are we doing this? What is this thing that we're participating in? What is this thing that culture has put a value on and is moving us towards? So there's a lot of different types of marriage. There's governmental marriage, and then there's religious marriages, but that's not just one type of marriage. Each tradition has their own sort of rituals and ideas of what marriage is and what you're participating in by entering that path. But in the modern frame, I think we do often talk about it in this sort of governmental, legal way. And in that space, we often pair that with this, what I guess I would call a consumer benefit model of marriage, where we look to how this is the best benefit for yourself and for society. Basically, it's just a real appeal to why marriage is a better choice and what you can gain from buying into the institution. But the more I thought about it, the more that I recognized that marriage has its foundation in religious practice. And in that frame, it's not really the emphasis of the legal or beneficial aspects of marriage. Its focus is on something else. It's inviting you into a path that will lead you to some sort of spiritual participation. this way of understanding the world and being transformed by this union. And there's probably a million stories of what marriage is, but I think for me, being a Christian, I wanted to understand, well, what is the spiritual path of marriage that Christianity invites me into? And I went on a bit of a journey to try to uncover that. I've looked in a lot of places and listened to a lot of people throughout my young adult and adult life to try to understand this question of marriage. But during this time was when I got introduced to Tim Keller's book, The Meaning of Marriage. I think this was the first time where I started to get a better sense of the path of marriage and the thing that I hadn't been explicitly told growing up in the Christian tradition that I was a part of. You know, the way he described marriage, it started to make me see things very differently. He didn't talk much about marriage in sort of this legal sense, and not even very much in sort of the beneficial sense of how this path could lead to happiness. But instead, he kind of described it as this act of trust, where a man and a woman come together, embrace the other, and find a way to not only influence, but be influenced by this person. And this lifelong commitment opens you up to facing your own selfishness and being changed inevitably by this person that you're taking the journey with. And when I went to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, the picture became even clearer and deeper, because there was this understanding that it wasn't only teaching me what it was to be human through a marriage path, but also more about who God was. You know, as I understand it in Orthodoxy, we see everything as icons for the divine, teaching us something about the nature of the thing that is bigger than ourselves and reflecting that out into the world. So it's like a window into heaven, giving you a taste of what life was always supposed to be. And in this proper participation of this path, you have the ability to create life. And not just spiritually, but quite literally. Now, I understand in Orthodoxy, this path to becoming more truly human and being an icon of the divine is not exclusive in marriage. There is a place for singleness as well, with monasticism and marriage being two distinct paths to the same spiritual destination. But with each path comes a different set of roles and responsibilities. Each path requires something different of the person who takes it on. And in that understanding, I started to see the beauty in both paths more and more, even if I recognized what each of them would cost. Now, on my way to discovering this meaning, more life happened and things got more complicated. And one thing led to another, and I came to the realization that there might be good reason for me to take on the path of marriage, and that singleness might not be the best thing for me. But in that realization, that meant that I had to open myself up to marriage and the ability to find it. And it's something I had been very hesitant to do for a long time. But I did choose to open myself up, and a year later, I met my husband. When we first met, before we even started dating, we'd actually had lots of conversations about marriage, about what it meant and what that looked like in our culture. And often when we were having these conversations, we would frame it in this way that looked at life as a sort of treacherous hike. You always have this ability to stand at the base of the mountain, look up, and acknowledge the treacherousness of the road ahead. And you could stay at the base of the mountain, eat ice cream, avoid that treachery, or you could take the call to adventure and attempt to climb the mountain and try to get to the top. And if you take that journey, you're going to meet a lot of people who are also trying to scale that mountain. And you have a lot of different relationships and orientations with those people along the way. But marriage was basically like making the decision to tether yourself to another person and spend the rest of your life taking on this journey of getting to the top of the mountain with that person attached. You know, you're committing to climb that mountain together through thick or thin. And there certainly comes limitations with that choice. You don't have the ability to just go whatever way you want. You have to think about the person you're tethered to. But in that, there's also this beauty of knowing you have somebody to navigate those trails together with. And there's this hope that this responsibility of having that person tethered to you helps you to act better and more responsibly in the way that you climb the mountain, because you're not the only one who you have to consider. When you're facing the most treacherous of roads, you will hopefully act more carefully, because the last thing you want to do is take this person you're tethered with down with you. So when we started dating, we didn't actually know if we would ever be able to get married. There was a few things standing in our way that made it a bit uncertain of whether that was even a genuine possibility. But we saw the potential for it. And when we looked at what that picture meant, it was beautiful enough for us to try. And by actually making that choice and attempting to do this thing, it required a lot of sacrifice for me and dying to myself and the things that I was moving towards and the person that I was, to give way for this path, for what seemed to be a more beautiful story. And so far, that's been true. But once this baby is born, it's going to require even more sacrifice of myself. And I mean, even now, the physical tolls that it's taking on my body in the last 6 months have put me face to face with the realities of what it really is to bring life into the world, and the uncomfortability that comes with that process sometimes. There's been a lot of talk about marriage and the crisis that surrounds it in a lot of circles, but especially this little corner. And I myself have been fairly attuned to those things. Navigating marriage in a modern frame has not and still continues to not be easy. And so I guess I'm very happy that these conversations are happening. I just hope that as they continue, we can find more ways to rediscover and re-enchant the path of marriage with the beauty that lies within it. And by beauty, I don't mean some surface level, fluffy depiction that makes marriage look very aesthetically pleasing. I think we do a disservice by shying away from some of the difficult parts of what marriage requires and what that means for many people who enter the institution. But by dealing with that insincerity and understanding and acknowledging the complexity and the messiness that is marriage, I think we can open up the conversation to how all of those things could be leading to a better story, and a story that's more beautiful than anything we've seen before. And I say that knowing that it was a thing that helped me navigate the complexities. You know, I'm facing the realities of what growing this little life inside of me means and what it's requiring of me. And I'm seeing how it's making me more human. But it's also opened my eyes and helping me recognize that through this process of growing life and giving birth, I get this weird opportunity to participate in the pattern of Christ, where I take on suffering for the life of another. And I guess I'm just overall grateful that I did find this sort of framing of marriage and family before I took on the path myself. I think this discovery of the beauty of marriage stopped me from limiting it to some moral good or beneficial path for myself, and ultimately helped me embrace some of the complexities of what it meant to be married and have a family, particularly in a world that feels really lost on what that even means and how to prepare for that path and move through it. It's slowing me down and grounding me in a way that nothing else ever has before. And it's showing me this beauty, which has been helpful and given me some joy in taking on the suffering and the sacrifices that this path costs, and finding joy in the way that it's changing me. That's all I have for now. But thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.